Hello and thank you for stopping by. Today I have this Echo chainsaw. It's an Echo CS352. That's a CS352. And the complaint with this saw, as you just saw, is that it'll start and it'll die out. I asked the owner a few questions about the saw when she dropped it off, how long the gas was in and so on. Not sure. But you can see there's quite a bit of dirt in here. I'm running with this chain loose like this. Before I get started, I'm going to clean this saw up. Once I clean it up, I'll be pulling this muffler off to see if the screen is clogged. We'll be checking the fuel filter to see if it's there, if it's connected, if it's clogged. We'll check the air filter. But out of curiosity, let's take a quick look. Here's to see what this is like in here. Now, something like this, it could be any one of those reasons. It could even be a broken fuel line or a break in the fuel line. Okay. Fuel filter by eye doesn't look bad. I'll pull this off later. We'll blow some air through there, see what comes off. I have to order one of these. I don't have this in stock, but that's looking okay. It's back in there. Okay, the air filter doesn't look bad on this. Looks pretty clean. Even looks like it has a new plug. Alright, so my first order of business is to clean this up. I'll be pulling this cover off over here also. Clean up all around in here. It's not terribly bad. A lot of times you'll get these chainsaws and they'll be full of sawdust and everything else in here. This one isn't bad. I do see something over here. Looks like there's tape on this fuel line. This may be an issue right here. This could be the whole thing. If this is sucking in air, it's not sucking in gas. So I'm going to clean this up, pull this off, see what I have, and I'm going to start with this fuel line. I'm going to take this off, see if it's raveled up, and see if I have to order a new fuel line for this. Right, I started the cleanup on this. I took the chain cover off, and this is typical of what you find when you open these up. As bad as this looks, this is about the norm, but this should be cleaned out from time to time. I started cleaning it from outside and I decided just to take it off and get in here. This was caked up all the way in here. Plus, over here you have your oiler, so you want to make sure this is all cleaned out. So when the saw is running, the chain is going to get the oil that it needs. I'll clean all this up, clean it out in here, flip it around, clean the other side. Then once I have it cleaned up, I'll start working on it. Two things that this accomplishes by cleaning this off before you work on it. One, you don't get this all over your workstation. If you have to open it up, you're not getting this debris on the inside. And besides getting it to run properly, most people appreciate getting their equipment back cleaned. So let me finish cleaning this up and then we'll start going through this. Before I started taking everything apart, I added fresh fuel to this saw, started it up, and it had the same effect. It would run, hit the throttle, and it would conk out. So I'm thinking, well, we'll have to adjust this carburetor. But before I did that, I went to the muffler first. I have the muffler off now. And in front of the muffler, you have the screen. To get the screen off, there's these two screws that hold the plate onto the muffler. They require a T20 torque to get them off. Now they were in there kind of stiff, and once I saw this torque wrench starting to twist a little, I used a mix that I have. It's composed of 50% transmission fluid and 50% acetone. I use this for nuts and bolts that are rusted. Spray it on, let it set a little bit, and they usually come right out. So once I remove these two screws, looked at the screen, and the screen is clear. A lot of times this will be clogged, not in this case. So I started it up with just the muffler on, and the muffler is held on by these two nuts, and they require an 8mm socket to get them off. These screws just go back there, the muffler slides over it, you bolt it down. I started it up without the screen on. I gave it gas and it seemed to be running fine. So The screen wasn't clogged. I'm thinking maybe this muffler's clogged. So what I'm going to do is to get a propane torch and heat this up some. Now, on my personal chainsaw, my muffler was clogged and it had so much carbon on it. When I hit it with the torch, it just burned for a few minutes. Did it a couple of times and it ran fine after that. This doesn't look like it's carboned up on the outside, but I don't know what's on the inside. I'm just going to heat it up a little bit, see if that makes any difference. I'm going to put this back together. I'm going to put the bar back on, the chain back on, and see how it runs with everything together. So let me clean this up, get it together, and we'll see how it runs from there. I got the saw all together, started it up. It started up fairly easy. The trigger response wasn't bad, and I took it over to a wood pile and I started to cut a log with it. It was running fine. Once it started getting into the log, it bogged right down. The usual causes for that are carburetor adjustment, some debris in the carburetor, a fuel line that might have a crack in it, which I didn't take that fuel line off yet to check. So I am going to make a slight adjustment to the high side of the carburetor. And one of the features of this saw that I particularly don't care for is the way they have this adjustments for the carburetor. They're kind of hard to see. They're located in here. Let's see, get the light on there. The camera could pick it up. I don't know if the camera's getting that or not. But you have the high and low screw, and they have limiter caps on them. Now those limiter caps are to prevent you over adjusting, either too lean or too rich, either the high or the low side. There are times when those caps may have to come off to make the proper adjustment. But for now, I just adjusted the high screw. I opened it up about 1/8 of a turn. I'm going to check to see if that solves the problem. If not, I'll be adjusting it back and forth a little bit, but I'm leaving those limiter caps on right now because our problem still may be that fuel line on the other side. If that fuel line is sucking air in, it doesn't matter how much you adjust these screws, it's not going to run properly. Let me get over to the wood pile and see what we have. Okay, a couple things I want to point out. First of all, we know the oil is working because you see when I was idling it up here, it was spraying the oil out. That's a positive. On the negative side, this isn't getting the gas that it needs. It's lacking the power. I adjusted the screws to the max and it wasn't doing anything. You can see how it was bogging down. And I found if you have this saw and you're adjusting the screws, there's the adjustment screws down in there, and there's those limiter caps. I had a hard time with the screwdriver getting into those caps, but with the cover removed, it was easy for me to see what position the screwdriver was in. I made all the adjustments I could with the limiter cap on. I'm coming to this side. I'm going to go back to the bench. I'm going to check to see what's going on with this fuel line. If this fuel line isn't cracked and for some reason they just have tape on it, my next step is to pull this carburetor out and see if there's debris inside the carburetor. This is next. I'll show you what I find. And to get this carburetor off, it's not that difficult. You have this T25 over here, and you have at each side of the air filter another screw. So once this comes off, that carburetor should slide right out. Just, if you're doing this, take pictures of your linkage and where your fuel lines go, so when you go to put it back together, you know exactly how it's got to go. If you take this off and wait a couple days, it could be a little tricky when you go to put it back together. So let me get started with this and I'll show you what I find. I pulled the fuel line off and it came off pretty easy, and it looks like there might be a little slit over here somewhere, or a cut. Really not 100% sure. It just might be a fuel line. I have to order a piece of line. I don't have this size. Sizes I have are too small. I can't squeeze them on. And this tape is on there for a reason. So whoever put this tape on knew there was some kind of problem here. So now that I have this open, I'm going to pull this carburetor off and see if I find anything on the inside of the carburetor. This screw requires a T25 torque bit, a screwdriver, or a driver, whatever you happen to be using. There are two more screws, one down here and one on this other side over here. I mentioned before, this is the first time I'm working on an Echo, and setup's a little different from what I'm used to, but the principle's all the same. And those two screws are loose. I pull this up, trigger mechanism here. We already have the fuel line off. So you have the throttle linkage right on top, and then you have the choke on the bottom here. See the way that goes? So I have to put the camera down so I can get those out. Let's see now. This we can slide right up, and it comes out like that. And as far as the throttle, let's see. Should be able to just turn this. And there we go for the throttle linkage. Now you have this other fuel line. And this comes right out. And this, the air filter, should have pulled this off first. It probably made it a little easier. Air filter just slides right out. Okay. I noticed that there isn't any gasket over here. I thought there'd be a gasket between these two. I don't know if one belongs in there, and it was just never put back on. And here's your carburetor. If you have to make adjustments that require more of a turn than what this is allowing, these have to come out. I'm going to leave these in if possible, because there are times when you pull these out, they get destroyed. You can't put them in. Doesn't hurt anything to leave them out, but if the owner is in the habit of adjusting them themselves, they could adjust it too high and you could burn out the engine. I just don't see any gaskets. I would think there would be a gasket on both sides here. There is an O-ring, but there's nothing to the air filter side. Maybe that's the issue? I don't know. Well, my carburetor toolbox. I did drain the gas tank before I started doing all of this. Alright, first thing, we'll check this side up here. There's only one screw that holds it in. I'm doing all this work outside, not to get the gas fumes or smell the gas in my garage. Winter time, we keep those garage doors closed, and I don't want it stinking up like gas. But it's kind of cool out here. Let's see what we got in here. Okay, this is usually the #1 culprit right in here. See this this screen often gets clogged, and I'm going to check it to see if that's the issue now. Do this one step at a time here. Maybe, let's see. Now you can get the screen out by putting a little air pressure in there, and if you don't watch, you'll probably blow it across the room. There we go. The screen looks like it might have been out once before. Just from the way the sides on it look. Looks like somebody was in here. Okay, and it doesn't look clogged. Holding it up to the flashlight. No, doesn't look clogged at all. This might have just been an exercise doing this. That's usually the #1 spot where I find the clog. This over here, I want to make sure this is pliable. This is your pump. Let's see if I can pull this off. I don't have a kit to replace this, so if I can't get this off, it's staying just the way it is. Well, I have to order the fuel line anyway. Looks pliable here. Let's get this side over here. We have these 4 screws here that I'm going to pull off. For the sake of time, I'm going to fast forward this. Okay. Here's your metering valve. Now when you get these off, you want to make sure that these are supple, where they can move, and they're not crispy. If crispy, they don't have the movement that they need to open up this fuel inlet. So everything looks okay over here. I'm going to be working off camera because I'm going to be spraying carburetor cleaner to all these ports in here, inlet, and throughout this whole carburetor. I'm going to blow it all out. I'm going to use my little wire to poke through. Right in here, there's a couple of ports right in there. Okay, there's a couple of ports I want to point out to you. I don't know if this camera's focused in enough where you can see there's a couple of ports right in there. Tiny little pinholes, can barely see them. All those have to be cleaned out. So I'll get the carb cleaner, clean this out. I'm going to put it back together. I'm going to clean that screen. Even though it looks clean, I'm still going to spray it out. Put this back together, put the carb back on, and get a fuel line for this, because I definitely need a fuel line, because we can see this one here again. We can see this has some kind of damage to it. I don't know if they did that when they were pulling it off with a pair of pliers. Doesn't look like it goes all the way through, and I don't know why that tape. Oh, right there it is. There's a split right there. I can see it. I don't know if the camera's picking it up. The tip of my fingers, there's a slit, if you can see that. Well, let me get started on this. It's getting late. I want to get this together, and I probably won't be able to fire it up and cut some wood tonight with it, but tomorrow we'll be out by the wood pile again. After reinstalling the carburetor, starting it up, adjusting the idle screws, it sounded like it was ready to go. When I hit the throttle, had a quick response, but as soon as I put that chainsaw to a log, it bogged down. So that's it for this carburetor. I went online to check the pricing of the rebuild kits for this carburetor, and they were anywhere from $8 to $15 for a rebuild kit. Now this carburetor from Warhol goes for $108 plus shipping. $108. I believe the saw goes for about $225 for a brand new saw, with a new carburetor, a new chain, new everything. So what I did, instead of buying the kit, I went online, I went to Amazon, and I bought a knockoff carburetor. Now these carburetors are a hit and miss kind of thing. They work, they don't work. I haven't used one on a chainsaw, but I've used them on lawn tractors and push lawnmowers, and I had pretty good success with them, hoping to have the same success with this one. Now this one here, you can see it's a Walboro. This over here is ANABA. The camera's picking that up. And before I go to install it, checking it out to make sure everything looks the same. The return line's in the same position on this one. It has the same ports, same mounting holes. The top looks the same. And everything looks the same on it. The feed line's the same on the same side. You want to watch when you buy these carburetors. Even though they claim to be a replacement, sometimes they don't line up. This could be in a different position, may or may not affect how it gets installed, but everything looks the same on it. Now one difference, this had the limiters on it, the limiter caps, so you couldn't over adjust it or under adjust it. This doesn't come with that. It just comes with the adjusting screws, high and low. Not only that, I would have to look now. I believe this was like $18 or $20. But with this carburetor, it came with a new pump. It came with a spark plug. Now, on the long tractors, when I bought carburetors for them, these kits, the spark plugs that come with them generally don't work that well. I don't know how it is on this one, but it's there. It came with a filter. It's not an OEM filter, but the OEM filters are anywhere from $4 to $8 when you go to buy them, just the filter alone. So it came with a new filter. Came with a fuel line. This carburetor requires 2 different size fuel lines. This is only one size. I already changed the fuel lines prior with, but it does come with this. Just pointing this out, so if you decide to get it for your own. Comes with a little screwdriver. I thought this was nice, but this is a flimsy screwdriver. Any pressure on this tip and it's gone. So this is kind of one or the other. But what it does come with, that the original carburetor did not have when I removed it, are these gaskets. I don't know if this carburetor requires gaskets. Generally, there's a gasket on both ends of the carburetor, or at least on one side. This one didn't have it. And it looked like somebody was in there before me. Did they take it off and not put it on? That doesn't make any sense, because when I pulled the carburetor off, it didn't look like anything was stuck to it. It came off pretty easy. But anyway, I'm going to install them, and that's it. So for $18, I call it $20. Again, I have to go look at the bill. For $20, I got the carburetor, the gaskets, and this fuel filter, plus the fuel line. This plug and the screwdriver, push that off to the side. Rebuild kit is about $8, like I said, to $10. I've seen them as high as $15, depending on where you go. So for the difference in the price, I'm giving this a shot. If this doesn't work, then I'm going to have to go for a rebuild kit on this, because $108 for a carburetor, may as well just buy a new saw. So let me get out there and install this carburetor, put some fresh gas back into it, fire it up, and see where we're at. Alright, I checked the saw out before I went in the house, got the camera and the tripod. It started up, and I finished cutting this log that I started with last week with the old carburetor on. It had a tough time going through it, but the saw's running properly. I believe this is locust, I'm not sure. This part over here is a little on the soft side, but this is really hard wood. I put this other log up here just because it has a little length to it, so I can stand on it and show you how the saw is cutting, and I can show you the startup on the saw. It was about a half hour ago that I cut that log. The saw should have cooled down by now. I'm going to start it up as a cold start. Prime it, pull the choke, make sure the on switch, push the choke in. It's because it's on video. The saw bogged a little bit now. I believe the chain either has to be sharpened or replaced. So before I start tweaking the carburetor and messing around with that carburetor again, I'm going to leave it as is. So that's a wrap. This carburetor with the gasket did the trick. Oh, the second gasket that came with it didn't fit back here. It might have been for a different setup, I'm not sure, but it didn't fit back. But I did put the gasket that was round to the front part of this carburetor. So I tightened it up. She's good and snug. She's got fresh fuel in it. The lines are clean. Everything's looking good. This is the new line I put in. I'm going to clean this up a little bit, and other than the chain, she's good to go. If you enjoyed this video, found it useful, give it a like. It does help. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe. Hit that Joe Z button, not to miss my new videos as I upload them. And until next time, stay warm and be safe.